like to get started and welcome you to the Careers in Art and Historic Conservation 2015. I'm Patricia Selinger, Head of Preservation and Inventory Management here at VCU Libraries. And I want to thank VCU Libraries and the Virginia Conservation Association for helping us put on this event. The conservation profession is not often represented as a career path, and VCU currently has no coursework that introduces students to the field. Nevertheless, I'm happy to say that Virginia has a wealth of working conservators, and many of them belong to the Virginia Conservation Association. The organization is open to anyone interested in the care and preservation of art and historic artifacts. Members are not only conservators, but also librarians, historians, collectors, non-specialists, and students. We meet 5 times a year at museums and historic sites throughout the Commonwealth. And this year, the VCA members had the pleasure to tour the Robinson House on the VMFA grounds and got a new look at the new galleries at the Valentine, and learned about how our state conservator, Kate Ridgway, restored the Dove of Peace weather vane at Mount Vernon, and then, I should say at Mount Vernon as they were filming National Treasures 2, and she recovered skeletons from a compromised graveyard on Tangier Island. So the work of the conservation community is not boring. The next VCA meeting is May 21st at H. Croft Hall, and the topic is going to be the recovery of the Iraqi Jewish archives that were found in the basement of Saddam Hussein's intelligence headquarters in Baghdad in 2003. Catherine Kelly from the National Archives will be talking about the work that went into cataloging, conserving, and digitizing that archive, which is now available online free throughout the world, and you all are welcome to come. So the website for Virginia Conservation Association is virginiaconservationassociation.org. And conservators often specialize in particular materials or groups of objects, as you'll see today, paintings, textiles, books, sculpture, or archaeology. They work in a variety of environments, not just museums, but also libraries, laboratories, government agencies, and private practice, also corporations. Conservators are responsible for long-term preservation, and they do this by analyzing and assessing the condition of an item, understanding the processes and evidence of deterioration, planning site management strategies that prevent damage, carrying out conservation, and conducting research. Conservation is an interdisciplinary field involving studio practices, the sciences, and the humanities. Coursework in organic chemistry, physics, art history, biology, and anthropology are a good foundation. This program is part of the VCU Libraries Preservation Week. Preservation Week began in 2010 to promote the role of libraries preserving public and personal collections. The need for collections care and conservation is critical. Surveys indicate 630 million items in collecting institutions require immediate attention, and work on our digital heritage has barely begun. So be sure to follow the VCU Libraries on Facebook and on Twitter for links to free webinars on moving image preservation, digital preservation for individuals, and disaster response. YouTube also offers Preservation Week events at institutions, and this program too will be featured on the VCU Libraries YouTube page. I did a search recently on Preservation Week for YouTube, and there were about 32,000 hits. So we have a table set up here with business cards and some free literature for you to look at that will stimulate your interest and inspire you to dream about your future. And we have 4 distinguished conservators active in the field here to tell you about their education and how they came to find this career path. You'll see that the path to a career is not always straight. Many people have been successful quite by accident, and few of us had life planned out as undergraduates, or if we did, those plans changed. And careers are an expression of what makes you happy. Know yourself and what sustains you, says the VCU Career Center, and understanding what gets you out of bed every day will take you far. So I posed questions to our speakers about how they got into the field and what keeps them going. I thought these might be questions that are foremost in your mind, but this session is for you. We want you to ask questions throughout, and there will be time for questions at the end as well, and we'll have time for networking and refreshments following the presentations. Elizabeth Belcher is our first conservator to speak. She's from the Richmond area and got her undergraduate degree here at VCU. She started working in conservation in 2008 and has been working with the Altria Corporation Collections, and I'll let her tell you the rest. Go ahead and get started here.
Thank you for that introduction. As Patricia said, my name is Elizabeth Belcher. I currently work as a full-time contractor for KSA Interiors, who then contracts me out to work as the collections manager and conservator at Altria. Altria has a large private collection that they have been collecting. The bulk of it came from the 70s. They had a tobacco museum and have collected a lot of historic objects relating to tobacco and trade. They also have a lot of paintings, sculptures, archival materials, and architectural features. KSA is an interior design firm. They take on projects for space planning and management. Art often falls into that category. The Altria collection is not open to the public, and it is a working collection for the benefit of employees. I'll talk more about what I do at Altria later on, but first I wanted to tell you a bit about my background. I've been working towards a career in conservation for about 8 years. I have a bachelor's here from VCU. I graduated in 2007 with an archaeology degree. During my time at VCU, the same as it is now, there was no conservation program, and I didn't really know much about conservation. My final year at VCU, I began working as a field archaeologist here in Richmond with a company called Cultural Resources Incorporated, and I also volunteered at the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. Through these two positions, I realized I was more interested in what happened to the artifacts after being discovered, and decided to start focusing more on conservation as opposed to archaeology. At this point, I decided to apply for grad school and also continue volunteering as much as possible to get my skills, basic skills going before getting into grad school. I started volunteering at the VMFA in the Ancient Art Department. I worked there about 2 days a week. It was not a conservation program, but it put me into the right environment for networking. And I was also learning more about other aspects about art handling. I worked there for about a year until a paid conservation technician position came up, and I was offered the position. With this work, I was primarily working on the Worsham-Rockefeller period room, which is now installed in the museum. That's an image of me working on the ceiling, which was paint on canvas. It was one of my first ever conservation positions, and I was also getting paid, so that was a plus. And that's just a photograph there on the left of some of the archaeology I was doing before getting into conservation. This was here in Richmond. It was a slave cemetery on a plantation. Again, that was with Cultural Resources Incorporated. All right. I had decided I really wanted to study abroad, mostly just because I wanted to experience living overseas. And I chose England for several reasons. One, I had been there just on vacation and I really enjoyed it. Two, they spoke English, so that made things a lot easier. And in my opinion, they had a lot more history and museums. So I felt that would be a really great place to experience learning about conservation. There are only a few programs in England that accept U.S. financial aid. University College London is where I ended up going, primarily due to the fact that they did take U.S. student aid. This program was initially meant to be for 3 years, have small numbers, and focus on objects conservation, to be taught as a whole. So you learned about metals, ceramics, organics, and stone all together. However, after a year, I felt the program fell short, and I ended up leaving the program for another program. There were several issues which led to my decision. The number of students greatly exceeded the number I was told, so I felt like the lack of student-teacher interaction suffered due to that. In addition, there was no hands-on work experience during that first year. It was all mostly focused on ethics and theory. While those are important subjects, I felt I would have learned more had they been taught alongside hands-on learning. The way the program was designed was meant that students did not begin working in the lab until the second year. The added problem of the excessive number of students accepted meant that there was physically not room for students in the lab for the second year. Due to this, UCL was forced to have all of the current students reapply for the second and third year. Having given up so much to move abroad with the expectation I would be there for 3 years, it was really disheartening and frustrating. Okay, after that I decided to look into other programs and found one in the English countryside of Chichester called Westdean College. Westdean is a private art school and conservation school. They only teach conservation and art. They did not accept U.S. financial aid, but they do offer many scholarships, and after applying I was offered full financial support. This program is much different than UCL. Instead of teaching objects conservation as a whole, you choose a specialty to focus on. They offer a variety of things to choose from, such as furniture conservation, ceramics, metal, books, clocks, and musical instruments. In addition, students are also meant to learn making of their chosen focus. I chose ceramics, and I was therefore required to take pottery classes as well. I found this way of teaching very helpful and practical. I've always been more of a hands-on type of learner. Knowing how your object has been made, what materials and techniques were used are very important in conservation. The class sizes were much smaller. My program only had 7 students with 2 teachers. Because the school was a private art school, they also offered weekend and short workshops to the general public. And as a full-time student, you are allowed to participate in any of those extra courses you wanted. Because of that, I was able to branch outside of my focus area of ceramics a bit, and I took extra courses on parchment and wax seal conservation, bookbinding, and enameling. So on the left here is a picture of Westdean. It's you live and you go to school all in the same building. Because of that, your conservation lab is open to you 24 hours a day. You can work as much as you want. It was much better having it that way. This is just a picture of my desk here. This is one of the projects I worked on while I was there. I completed, I think, about 13 objects during my time there. These are all real objects that people from the general public or other museums give to the students at West Dean in order to work on, and West Dean also charges them a small fee to do that. This one in particular is a Roman flagon borrowed from given to us by the Roman Fishbourne Museum in England. After completing my program at West Dean, I was able to stay in England for an extra 2 years and work. This was due to a post-study work visa. I volunteered on a couple of projects until I was offered a paid position at the British Museum. I worked in the Asian department as a collections manager, where I installed exhibitions, maintained storage areas, prepped for loans including creating objects, making mounts, and maintained the database including doing photography. When it comes to studying and living abroad, it was an amazing experience. I was able to travel to other countries on long weekends, meet many interesting people, visit a lot of amazing historic sites and museums, and really become immersed in the culture. However, there were some downsides to studying abroad. The visa issue is very difficult to navigate. I was only able to stay after completing my program for 2 additional years, and the visa which allowed me to stay no longer exists. I was the last year group people to get it. The visa system changes every year, and they make it very difficult to understand it as well. After having built a life in England for 4 years, having made good friends, found a great job, I had to leave. It was a really sad day. In addition, I spent 4 years building contacts and networking. I was more familiar with the British way of doing things, that when I returned, it was a bit challenging getting involved again. There's also the financial burden in the form of the huge student loan bills due to the international student status and the exchange rate for that first year at UCL. So just quickly, the picture on the left was a project I worked on at the Victoria and Albert Museum. Was just a volunteer position I was doing before working at the British Museum. This is just an image at the British Museum here, working on some storage solutions for some of the objects that they had. Sorry, I think I'm a bit behind on my slides. So after having the experience of living abroad and attending 2 very different conservation programs, I would advise students to do a lot of research beforehand, know why you want to study abroad, and if it will be worth it to you in the long run. There's a huge amount of preparation involved before you go and before you return home as well. You'll need to be flexible and independent. When looking at programs, ask yourself if you would rather know a little about a lot of different types of conservation or lots about one type of conservation. Are you the type of learner who learns better from books or hands-on experiences? Try to do as much volunteering as possible so that you might have a good idea of what type of conservation you're interested in. There are a lot of options. Having the opportunity to do it again, I might not have chosen ceramics, but rather books and paper to focus on. Think practically, what are you good at? Do some research into which conservation field has more job opportunities as well. When it comes to breaking into the field of conservation, the aspect I found the most helpful was how much I got involved. Volunteer, even if 1 day a week, as a means of networking and staying brushed up on skills. Join as many conservation and museum groups as possible, such as the Virginia Conservation Association. Being a member of groups greatly helps with networking and allows you the opportunity to get behind-the-scenes info and tours offered only to the group. Staying involved has led to many paid positions for myself. I was only able to get the position at the British Museum after accepting a temp position as a gallery attendant. I only had to work this job for 3 months before the collections position came up. My current position I got due to word of mouth from networking. Many of these types of positions are not advertised to the public and only internally advertised. So if you are already involved, whether it be from volunteering or working a retail position in the museum gift shop, you are more likely to hear about that position and know someone who may help you get a foot in the door. Alright, so a bit more about what I currently do. Before I began working for KSA and Altria, I was primarily focused on museum work. I had no idea there was such a variety of work out there, especially not in the corporate field. Working with a corporate collection is much different than in a museum collection. There are a lot of large corporations which collect and maintain art. Within these roles, you have to understand that art does not take the priority, and it is a working collection. This means there are different challenges as a conservator to face. I've had to clean things such as spilled coffee off of paintings. I've encouraged people not to push whiteboards up against the paintings. We have smoking rooms that have paintings in them as well, and the nicotine that comes off of those paintings is incredible. There's often food everywhere, so you have to watch out, again, for spilled food, pests, mold, all kinds of things. And because this collection does not take priority, because they are not a museum and art is not what they do, before I started working this position and the curator who works along with me, because there's only 2 of us that take care of the art, there was absolutely nobody looking after the art. Since we began, we've been finding art stashed in cardboard boxes and mechanical sheds, damp basements, anywhere they could find to stick something. I've been here for over a year now, and we're still finding things. Some days it is literally like Christmas morning. I will find a box, or someone will call me and say, "Hey, I found this box. It says art on it. Do you want it?" And I'm like, "Yes, bring it over." And I open it, and it's antique, historic African pipes. I mean, it's amazing. It has been a challenge to get everything clean, labeled, repaired, and stored properly. But there are benefits to working in this environment. There are typically no budget issues. You tend to get paid a bit more than if you're in a museum. And gaining the interest of a previously totally uninterested audience is very rewarding. Since we've started building a proper art and conservation room, more people have been taking notice. We install rotating exhibitions in our lobby spaces, and Altria has 4 buildings in Richmond. We rotate them around all 4 buildings as well. We now even get requests from people for new art near their desks or in conference rooms. And we've begun work on a proper database so that the art will not be forgotten about in the future. And just a bit about these photographs. The picture in the top left is some storage solutions, making cutouts that I've been working on. This is all stuff that was found in cardboard boxes in a basement. This picture on the top right, we have a large collection of historic duck decoys because the CEO really loves them. This is actually in his office, and some of them are very old and very fragile. It's really funny, going back to talking about how the art does not take priority. When it came time to clean all these and label these and photograph them, because nothing had ever been done with them before, we took 2 days while the CEO was out of his office to do all this, and had multiple people helping out, and we're very detailed on it. And when we bring them back to him, he just picks one up by the neck and starts, swinging it around, and it's just like, it was quite scary, but you can't really say anything because, again, it's not, they don't see art the same way we do. So as a conservator, it's really challenging to get the people who work here to really pay a bit more attention. So anyway, the bottom left is a mini exhibition we put up. We do like about 4 really large exhibitions a year. And then in between we do just what we call art attacks. We just do a tiny little exhibition in the lobby and rotate it around for just a couple weeks. This image is of a modern sculpture ceramic. It was broken when we found it in a closet. And after it was repaired, it's really hard to see on this photograph, but then it's installed there in that exhibition on the left. And so again, I would advise those interested in this field to keep an open mind when thinking about where to find paid positions. Again, before this position came up, I had no idea that corporations collected art or maintained them. As you know, the people who work there don't even know that the art is not something that was just bought from Target. You know, since I've been involved in this field, I've really learned that there's art everywhere, and there's definitely a lot of other possibilities for work other than just working in a museum. I would advise people to focus on networking and staying involved. It is the primary thing that has led to paid positions for me. The relationships you make will be an asset not only for finding work, but also when you need advice on a project you're working on. I still have times where I have to reach out for advice when something weird comes up. And just do as much as possible to gain experience and ensure that you are choosing the right focus for you. And that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. So I've been recently, I kind of like fell out of my swing too, I guess. And I have so many interests that now I'm just kind of applying rapid fire to everywhere that interests me for volunteering and paid positions. So I'm wondering, with your experience of kind of being unhappy with everything being taught to you at once versus having the opportunity to really hone in, I mean, obviously, it depends on what was better for you, but back in the States, what do you think would be more helpful as far as keeping that door open without sort of losing your interest?
I mean, again, it's just, you know, it's hard to know what you're interested in until you start doing it, because until I took that short course at Westine about bookbinding and paper conservation, I had no idea that that's something I would really enjoy. So just, you know, trying to volunteer, even if it's just one day a week or just on a short-term project that maybe only lasts a couple weeks, just, you know, getting as much experience as you can to give yourself an idea of what you do like and what you don't like, because you really don't know until you're actually doing it whether or not, you know, you're going to end up finding it tedious and boring or it's something you're going to find exciting. You just really don't know until you're actually doing it.
Thanks.
Yep. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Our next speaker is Claudia Walpole. She is from Central Ohio originally and started working in conservation in 1990. She's based in the Charlottesville area and has been in private practice for most of her career. She loved getting involved in the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley's exhibition on Patsy Cline. The costumes and personal wardrobe must have been a real treat to work on and prepare for display. And she's a graduate of the Textile Conservation Center at the Courtauld Institute of Art, University of London. And let's see, is it this one?
It's WCS.
Let's see. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. There it is.
There
On
it is.
there.
Okay, sorry.
Hello. It's nice to to be here today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background and my rather circuitous route to conservation, as Patricia alluded to and Beth, and then talk a little bit about the objects. I'll just do everything on one slide and then we can just have at it. Oh, I didn't know that was a GIF, I'm sorry. So Vivian is going to be, moving, I guess, apparently for you all. Sorry about that. I did my undergraduate work at Miami University in Ohio. I was in theater. I had a dual concentration in performance and costuming. And when I have a sister who's an actress, an equity actress. I knew what New York was all about. By the time I got to my junior year, I did a junior year abroad in Luxembourg. And by that point, I knew that design wasn't for me because I wasn't cutting edge and exciting enough. I knew what the design world was like in New York City, and I just thought, I don't know, I think either I didn't have the courage at the time or I just wasn't feeling it. At any rate, when I was in Luxembourg, I went to a lot of museums. I loved history, and with my love of textiles and just about everything else, architecture, etc., jewelry, I started thinking about the preservation issues and realized there was a whole profession there that I knew nothing about. So I started doing research. When I got back from my senior year and senior year part 2, because it was on the 5-year break, gotta say, you go to Luxembourg, you take more time. So I then started to write, essentially, a postgraduate degree for myself at the time, while looking for a textile conservation program, which I found in London, in actually Surrey, Hampton Court Palace. And I needed to work to get there about a year. So what I ended up doing was realizing, okay, I wanted to focus solely on textiles. The only program, there was no program specifically on textiles in the States. There's Buffalo, there's Winterthur, and it kind of makes me think, just following on Beth, if I can digress for just a moment, you might look into those programs and look to see what disciplines they include, because that is absolutely a way many of us get into survey conservation courses so that we can see what we really want to do. And then you have, if they have practicums, then you can go about, or you can do some research. Another avenue, looking at Sheila, she's from the VMFA, if you can go to a broad collection, we're probably looking at larger museums, aren't we? And that you can talk to many different people, you can do professional interviews, you could see if there's any way to volunteer, different departments, not necessarily even conservation, but looking at different disciplines. That might be another avenue you might want to explore. So getting back to, I knew that I wanted to go into textiles. So I've discovered the TCC, housed at Grace and Faber Apartments at Hampton Court Palace, and the accreditation was offered by the Courtauld Institute of Art. They had archaeology and murals and paintings housed in London. The TCC was started by Karen Finch and was housed at, as I said, Hampton Court Palace, which was tremendous fun, actually. It was very cold in the winter time. We had ghosts, which was fun. And one of the wonderful things about the TCC at the time was it also had a professional lab. So there were a team of conservators working on a number of different projects all the time. We were always encouraged to go down, to talk with the conservators, to oversee what they were looking at, what they were working on, and ask questions, etc., while also pursuing our degree. It was a 3-year program. As I said, it was postgraduate, so it technically was not a master's degree, although over here we tend to view it as a master's, which is nice for me, although I don't necessarily need it. It would fulfill credits and such if I wanted to go on with a PhD. I haven't pursued that yet, but it's, I have time. So I'm very busy working right now. So I had a really positive experience at the TCC. That program has morphed. It is now essentially, we'll just fast forward a number of years. I graduated in '89. I was offered a job with the National Trust. I then had to apply for my work permit. There were only 8 of us on the course, and there were just a handful of, actually there were 2 Americans I was offered a job, and it took a year to get a work permit. I got that work permit a day after I accepted a job back in the States. It was that dramatic, and had decided to come home because my two sisters were beggars and whatever. So I thought, family's bringing me back, I'll go back up. I still miss England. I still visit it as much as I can. It's been a number of years now. The breadth of collections are unparalleled, I think. They're extraordinary. And the opportunities to work there are absolutely brilliant. So I, like Beth, like Mary, I loved it, and I was afraid that I wasn't going to have the opportunity to work on costumes as much as I had done in the States. Of course, our collections are different, but as you can see, this is just a smattering of projects that I've worked on recently. I did have that opportunity, so all was not lost. So I was at a regional lab for 2 years in New York, which I loved, actually. And regional labs are brilliant because it's another good, actually. Somebody to look, the regional labs for whatever disciplines interest you, because they get a variety of different objects. And that's like a major museum. You're going to be looking at lots of world cultures, as well as American, and lots of different, dimensional objects that will offer you lots of means of learning and sort of expanding your abilities. It's very exciting. My best client, actually, is the VMFA, for whom I've worked, probably almost 15 years now, which is astonishing to me. So I'm very blessed, very, very blessed. And I love being attached to the museum because it gives me the opportunity to work on everything from storage. We're about to redo textile storage, so I'll lay my hands once again, as I did the first time around, on every object, textile object that they own. I also work on exhibition. We work on mounts. We work on climate control and microclimates within exhibition spaces. We work with the designer. That's a very important job. With the lighting designer, the designer who oversees the entire installation. The conservator is, I think, an essential part. I mean, I would say that, but we're an integral part. We're like the last line. We're making sure that the textiles, the artifacts, whatever they are, paintings, sculpture, whatever artifact we're looking at, we're making sure that the best care possible is being taken with each one throughout the entire process of shipping, installation, light levels, humidity control, everything. So I'm sorry, I'm sort of jumping about a bit. At any rate, after I was at the lab for 2 years, at the Textile Conservation Workshop, it was called, in South Salem, New York. I loved it, but I realized I didn't want to stay in the Northeast at that time. I then had the idea that I wanted to work with translators to translate a lot of the materials that we have to keep in mind. This is the early 1990s, so we didn't have the internet to depend upon, and we didn't have access to a lot of materials being published in Japan, in Europe, on conservation. And so I started working, I went back to Ohio, and I started working with a team of translators on a number of articles and research that was carried out abroad, and translating it for the purpose of conservators to further their knowledge, and just we are always continually learning from one another. As I discovered, people didn't conserve textiles very much in Ohio. It wasn't a priority for a lot of collections, which is fine. I also sold books, very specific to textile conservation, but it touched on lots of different areas. So I did that for about a couple years, and I started looking about a bit. I was offered a job in England doing tapestry conservation, but at that time I couldn't get back there. Once again, you mentioned visas, very difficult to get, even though, even opening up to the EU, that wasn't even an issue. It was just simply getting them to understand what a textile conservator did. It's hard. It's very hard, but that's okay. So I ended up coming just sight unseen pretty much to Charlottesville. And it has taken quite some time, but the intent was always to continue to work in conservation and really sort of tap into a lot of the historic houses and the museums, big and small, in this area. Also in South Carolina, North Carolina, and then moving up into the Northeast, sort of overlapping areas. It took a while to develop that business, but it worked out very well for me. And again, the MFA came to my rescue a number of years ago, and we've had a very happy relationship all that time. I remember looking at Scott Nolly's talk, and Scott, it's true. When you work privately, even I can't speak for an institution. I never have a dull day. I have such an amazing array of clients. I really mostly work for corporate clients or business clients. I take very few private clients. In some ways, it's because sticker shock is kind of hard for them, and I completely appreciate and understand that. If I'm swamped with work, I take just far fewer private clients because it's just simply difficult to sort of bring them along. Education is absolutely always a part of our job, I think. Sort of the general public and getting the word out about conservation and preservation. It's not nearly as it doesn't come to mind here in the States as it does in England and abroad. It just, we're spread out, which is fabulous. I mean, for all the wonderful reasons, we're still a throwaway society. So we don't think sort of in those terms of building and, so the buildings in which we live and work, it's not necessarily, it doesn't come to mind every day, where it does in England and Europe. But as you can see, I work on just about everything. Anything that has textile, I work on. I don't know where to start. Up here, we just finished doing, it closed. When did it close? Forbidden City, exactly. It was a wonderful exhibition. I loved working. I assisted them with installation and de-installation. And I loved it because we had this fascinating crew from the palace, from the Forbidden City. And we had wonderful interpreters. And I learned a lot from them when we could take time. It was quite a pressured work period, but it was exciting. This was the Empress's robe, and there's a fur-lined jacket. There's a couple of things from that exhibition. So again, we were not only dealing with mounting the textiles, but also talking about the environment. We were checking light levels. We were making sure that the textiles were safe while everything else was going on around us. This is a banner that I discovered was done by D.B. Bustill, who was a prominent, it was very exciting, a prominent American painter, an artist, one of the most noted artists of his time in the African American community. And he did, for bread and butter, he did banner painting, and he was from Philadelphia. And we were very excited when we discovered this. I don't know if you can tell, but there's like lots of empty spaces here. This is like putting a puzzle back together. This would be about a year. We haven't gone through with this project yet, but we'll see. But anyway, I'm analyzing that with, this is at Wake Forest. So I do painted textiles. This is a talismanic shirt from 1400. And it has the Quran written on it. It's starched cotton, and it's almost like a painting, essentially. It's fabulous. I did the mount for that. This is at the BMFA. This is just showing a wet cleaning treatment that I do. I guess I could hit really quickly on textile conservation is sort of the poor cousin in a way. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but it kind of is. People, we wear textiles. We sleep on them, we wash with them. They're such intimate objects to us. People don't think about that in the same way. You don't wrap yourself in a painting or a sculpture. So they touch them all the time. It's something that we don't really think about. So this kind of material culture wasn't necessarily meant to last forever, but a lot of objects, we want them to last forever. Not forever, but what we say as conservators is we hope that we have another 100 years by our intervention, which is always conservative in approach, ergo the name. But because everything that we do is reversible. There's very little that's carried out in conservation. That whole concept is that every technique is documented, everything that's done to the object is documented. We approach it with the view that this is the last time somebody's going to touch this artifact for a while. So how are we going to treat it? What's going to happen to it? And then everything that we do is absolutely reversible. So we're always looking, and that continues to morph and change. We're always looking for new ways to conserve and preserve artifacts. Textiles, our number one enemy essentially is light and then soiling. So everything, we always joke as textile conservators that we have a degree in vacuuming and backing up, because you're always backing up with your objects, etc., wherever you are. And vacuuming is the number one tool for extracting the soiling. It's very acidic, so you want to get that out. So that's done lots of times through a screen, if the object is really frail, or fragile, excuse me. And then, if you can, sometimes you do wet cleaning, sometimes you do spot cleaning, sometimes you do solvent cleaning, and then it involves a lot of stitching. So that was my background. I really had, and it's a hand. We use very little machine. Obviously, you don't. For support materials and things, we do hand stitching support. We also dye our own fabrics often with Selinger dyes, so that the light fast and that they're safe for use in archival and next to an artifact. There again, there's another costume that's from Ronaldo House, I think. We touched on, very briefly, I mentioned Patsy Cline because it was a phenomenal exhibition. It was the one time in Winchester that a number of her personal belongings, primarily belonging to a small museum there, but some things from the family too, who we met, were brought together and presented, and it was a delightful little exhibition. And rarely do I have that opportunity to work on so many artifacts or pieces of clothing, very intimate, objects, accessories and stuff from one person. I also work a lot on for a private client of Michael Jackson. So I don't have the same insight on the pieces that I had for Patsy. It was incredible, and so it's a small museum, and it was very hands-on. So I did everything from customizing the mannequins to doing conservation. I did a whole survey of over 100 of her pieces, and then researching. I sort of bordered on curatorial too, but we were all sort of in it together as a team. Then we were researching to see where Patsy wore a particular dress, when she wore it, what did it, was it worn for a show, was it this private life? Anyway, it was tremendous fun. So that was the most in-depth, I think, that I've ever been, had the opportunity to do on a particular person. At the VMFA, we also had Hollywood costume last year, so I ended up doing the one of the Wicked Witch of the West's hat. That was fun. And obviously Scarlet. That was another opportunity, as well as working with the crew from the V&A, the Victorian Albert Museum in London, helping them with installation, which I always love. I hope we do lots more with them. And I get an opportunity to work on lots of different world cultures too. The top here, this is a Peruvian feather tabard. I think it's 5th to 8th century, and it's phenomenal because the feathers are still so vibrant. They're just absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, it's a very fragile piece, but that's still on display. And then down here I have a great Cuba velvet. So we have a wonderful African collection, and that's still being collected for us, still taking in lots of wonderful accessions and everything. I love that opportunity because they're just absolutely amazing textiles. And in the center there to the left of Scarlet is a carpet bag. And it's an honest-to-goodness carpet bag, which I've never seen before. That was tremendous fun. That's going to be going on display soon at the VHS, right here in Richmond. And anyway, I just wanted to sort of show you that I also work on tapestries, samplers, and if I have multimedia projects or things that have lots of different elements, I love talking to my colleagues in objects, in paintings. So there's a lot of cross-referencing going on there, and the opportunity to learn from conservators all the time. So I think that's about it. I wonder if there's any question. Yes,
Claudia, I'd just like the audience to know that you don't own just one business, Conservation Studio, but your other business, your Scrolly Biz. Because I think it speaks to how we have to sort of find creative ways, literally, to support ourselves in the concert.
That's true.
So, if you just...
Well, I have a very small custom jewelry business. And it, you know, conservation requires that we be very methodical. It's laborious work, but I love it. You know, it calls a certain kind of person, I think, who doesn't mind losing hours, you know, working on a different object. But there isn't necessarily that much creative opportunity to express yourself creatively. So I think that's why I chose jewelry. And you know, looking back when you talk about, you know, wondering which direction should one go in, I wish I'd also been able to pursue jewelry too at the time, but that would be objects. But maybe I can. Who knows? There's still time. That's what I'm telling myself. So I don't rely on that as a full income, but it certainly is a tremendous creative outlet for me. And I love it. And for all your jewelry needs, I can just let me know. I have cards. But anyway, I pull a lot on, you know, my love of history for that. So my conservation really feeds my jewelry business in a big way. I mean, it really does. So as Sheila would tell you, yeah, and Mary, they know. So yes.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One, you talk about being involved with installing exhibitions and shipping items and all of that. Do you learn all of those things as part of your training when you're doing your postgrad work, or do you just learn it on the job?
Great question, because I really didn't talk about the program. If you go program, if you don't do apprentice necessarily, but you go program, you really do. Now, my program was 3 years long. We had 8 students, 3 years. We had 5 teachers. It was amazing. We had practical work in the first year. We handled a lot of objects, and they had the breadth of the collection was enormous. They had a great study collection because it's England, and you know what they had in study collection, we might actually accession in the regular piece. So you do a lot of theory, you do chemistry, physics, etc., but you also learn a lot of practice. There's a huge block on the environment, and within that you look at the exhibition environment, the traveling environment, and and also through the practical work, you may start focusing on different things. You may hit a point at the V&A when they're starting to cart up, you know, to pack up, a Hollywood costume. So you can start to look at that and everything. And I worked a number of different places. Kensington Palace Court Dress Collection, was really great. Worked at the Museum of London. Worked at the V&A. Worked at a number of smaller museums and historic houses. So I was able to sort of pick up and go more in depth. So you don't necessarily gloss over them, but you do spend time, absolutely, working on. And then it's a matter of experience. It's true, what comes your way after program, or if in your 3rd year you want to focus on that, something in particular. Yeah.
And follow-up question. Since you work for yourself, how do people find you, and also how do you set your prices? Because I imagine the amount of time or whatever that's involved is different per piece, so how do you say it's going to be this much money?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are lots of different questions there. How do people find me? Once I was at the VMFA, I mean, I was supposed to do VCA, I'm embarrassed to say this. The only time I was able to go to VCA is when I taught, so I haven't been able to go to a lot of VCA meetings, being in Charlottesville. this is the reason why son's here. Thank you. Yes. That's one thing I loved about being able to work privately was I was able to be home with Max. So I'm sorry to embarrass you, but there you go. That's my job, right? As a mom. Now, it's sort of word of mouth, and when you're working for institutions, it works out the best that way because, like I said, I don't. It's hard taking on private clients because it's hard for them to want to spend the money necessarily. Though I do it very gently with people and I explain to them what's entailed, and that certainly has changed over the years. It took a long time to get my private conservation practice going full time. Word of mouth is essentially from curators and conservators at the MFA and lots of other places, VCA. I even have people referring me from, I still have inquiries from England on occasion, which is amazing, having been a student at the TCC. Now, the more formal way is to go through the American Institute of Conservation. They have the Friends, FAIC, Institute of Conservation. And that's a way a lot of different people, not only professionals but private clients, can find a conservator in the discipline they choose of for the object for which they need help. So there's a whole database we belong. That's kind of like our AMA. That's our professional. So we have a code of ethics, etc., and by which we abide. And so people can find a conservator in the region. And so that's how people find me. I have never advertised in my life. I've even forgot my cards. So I apologize. But Patricia will know where to find me. And please ask questions if you have them. Pricing. Well, it's like a bête noire. It's really tough. I don't know what it is about conservators and private ones, and Mary could attest to this too. You end up doing so much more, like all of us, but every profession, I don't know, you end up spending more time than for which you're paid. So you have to sort of man up. You really have to just go, okay, I'm worth this time. I don't know why it's difficult, but it is. One thing that just came out that was actually a big boon to me, and you do it by word of mouth. When you go to AIC conferences, you talk to your colleagues who are in private conservation. There is a group for private conservators for the AIC, so that meet and discuss all of those issues and insurance, etc. You have to look at your region, and you have to look at how much experience you have, and then you have to work out a sort of a schedule of benefits, a schedule of charges. I didn't used to charge for doing initial conservation reports, but I would end up spending 10, 15 hours sometimes, because you can do a lot of research depending on how much you know or don't know about the piece or what the client requires. I now charge for that, but it took me 20 years, necessarily have the courage to do that and to realize, actually, you spent a good little time, and that time was worth something. I started to allude to a survey that the FAIC, actually, I can't remember if that's who, it may be the Conservators in Private Practice, sort of did a survey of salaries and fee charge per hour for a number of different conservators, and it's astonishing. And I've discovered that, and I was thrilled to see that my current my current hourly rate was absolutely spot on, was my average, which was kind of a fluke in a way. I just sort of kept, looking at that, and then you really have to just be practical too, and say, this portion of my house is dedicated to this work. I pay this much, out of utilities and so on and so forth. And after a certain period of time, you say, this is what I can offer my client. I'm not an expert, but I continue to learn, and I promise them that I will do my best for their object. So that's worth something, and you have to sort of summon up the courage and say, okay, I have this experience, of 20 odd years. I have this amazing network of conservators on whom I can call, and that's worth something. So I don't know, that's a rather roundabout way to answer that question, but it's a tough one. It is. So, yes.
Do you monitor market value of items? Like,
Good question.
is there
No.
a fine line between conservator and appraiser?
Oh, it's actually a conflict of interest, as you can imagine. So we don't even go there. I'm so thrilled to be able to say that. It's like I have no idea. It is a conflict of interest. It would be really problematic, actually, if we discovered that. I mean, it's against our code of ethics, actually. So we don't ever appraise. And for us, it's sort of oftentimes they're very personal objects and very personal artifacts, especially in textiles. So sentimental value can far exceed market value, because market values, wane. What was popular 15 years ago in the textile market could be very different now. So we happily, I don't even have like the best, like my go-to appraiser. I send them to a couple different national organizations and say, look for somebody in your area because I have no clue. And I can't tell them, of course it's worth it to, or no, this is rubbish, But that's a good question, yeah. So, thank you everyone, and please email me if there's another question that you have that you think of later. So, I appreciate your time.
So, thank you, Claudia. And Sheila Payaqui is our next speaker. She is the Associate Conservator of Sculpture and Decorative Arts at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. She started working in conservation in 1991 and graduated from the University of Delaware Winterthur Conservation Program in 2005. Her major was objects conservation with a minor in preventive conservation. She's traveled extensively throughout her career, most recently to Beijing, China, to return the Forbidden City exhibit.
Hello, everyone. That's a good segue that we had.
Here you go.
I'm going to start with just talking about how I ended up becoming a conservator, and talk a little bit about what I do at my current museum. And you will notice that I started in '91 and didn't get my degree until 2005. So I'm one of those who took the long route to getting a degree. So there's lots of ways of skinning a cat. Which is a horrible analogy. So I went to the University of California in Santa Cruz, where I pursued a degree in studio art. Now, this was no small decision. As a first generation to come here and to go to college, this was going to be a hard sell to my family. So with that in mind, I looked at everything. So education, can I become an art education teacher? So I went that route, and I did my first student teaching where I had 30 kids in kindergarten, and it was fun. And I took the bus back home, and I remember waking up on the bus, and like everyone was gone. And I thought, I think this is a sign that I might not have the energy level it takes. So I admire them immensely, but I thought this might not be for me. So what I did was, I thought, let's see how people are using their art degree. Not just as an artist, but in other ways too. So what I did was, I put together, I asked for money from my university, so really tapping into the resources there as an undergrad, and getting some money to go to Chicago, of all places, to work at the Museum of Contemporary Art with a curator, and also with the Evanston Art Center, so museum as well as a regional center. So it was great just sort of getting that experience and talk to other people and what their careers were like and how you became a curator or things like that, or what are the issues in museums. So while I was at the Museum of Contemporary Art, they had a Julian Schnabel exhibition. Now I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but paintings with broken plates and then the portraits are painted on top of it. And it was one of those things that we were supposed to walk through and make sure there weren't any bits on the ground before the exhibit opened to the public. So that was my first introduction to conservation. So I started looking into that, and I saw the requirements, and I thought, chemistry, I don't think so. I was already in my junior year. I'd already fulfilled my science requirement, and I thought, let me just think this through. So my first advice is if you're still working on your undergraduate prerequisites and you're thinking about conservation, which details exactly what you need, go ahead and match those art history classes, chemistry classes, just use it. I mean, you're already paying for it. I mean, and you have to do it to get your degree, so just do it. I took astronomy. No level. I still don't understand vectors. It's okay. There's other ways of understanding physics. But, so that's just undergraduate. I ended up graduating with a degree in studio art with a focus on printmaking. Now, if you noticed, I'm an objects conservator, so go figure where your path will take you. So it was a lot of looking at thinking I wanted to be a paper conservator and trying to get into labs, but it just seemed I kept ending up with sculpture, which I fell in love with, so it worked out quite well. But after I graduated, I ended up moving to San Francisco and just volunteering, working as a temp, whatever I could do to start my network, as others have talked about. And I was able to get an internship at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. And while I was there, I was shared between conservation and design. So that started as an internship and eventually evolved into a technician position within the Objects Conservation Lab. So for over a course of 7 years, that accounts for the time, I was the Objects Conservation Technician, and it was an incredible time. It was opening up the sculpture garden. We had the Mellon bequest of Degas bronzes and waxes coming into the collection. A lot of object-heavy shows at the museum, as well as a really busy loan program. So I was able to travel as a courier for many of the pieces. And a wonderful curator told me, everywhere you go, look at as many things as you can. So you're building that visual vocabulary in your head, because you just never know when you're going to encounter something and it just triggers, wait, I think I saw that at that museum in Graz, Austria. You know, you just never know when they're all going to click. So just taking every opportunity you can to see anything. Historic museums, you just never know where that little spark's going to come from. Or who's doing great work. These small sort of in-house exhibitions can be incredibly fascinating, just the amount of knowledge that are in all these different places. So that's where I did a lot of travel. And also at the time, being in Washington, D.C., I was able to work with other conservators as their assistant, so doing private work with other established conservators, which included a stint at the White House, who happened to be, I think the Clinton administration was trying to showcase U.S. artists. So they had outdoor sculpture by U.S. artists, and I was able to work with Andrew Baxter, who was actually based in Richmond, so I worked for him and worked on that. So it's funny how it's not so much what you choose, but what seems to choose you. And in my case, it was outdoor sculpture. I could not separate myself from outdoor sculpture. Because we opened up this new sculpture garden at the National Gallery of Art, being their technician, I got to work with riggers and people pouring footings and horticulturists, just that whole thing, and thinking about how to maintain this. So I was able to learn how to develop a maintenance plan, and then to actually carry it out and see where there were issues, because I was there for a long enough stretch. So towards the end of my career, I had a wonderful, so being there, what was great is I was in a lab that had pre-program interns, interns that were in conservation programs, as well as people who had established careers and were coming into sort of advanced fellowships. And it was wonderful learning from their experiences, the way we're coming up here to talk to you, just how they've done things, how they wish they had done something in another way. Incredibly valuable and really helped guide how I ended up approaching my path. So I had a wonderful mentor who said to me, I would love you to stay as my technician, but I don't want you to wake up at 40 and say, what am I still doing here? So she said, I want you to at least apply to school and then just go from there. You can make your choice. And very wise woman. So I applied. I was fortunate enough to get into the Winterthur program in Delaware. And what's wonderful about that program is you don't have to know what your major is when you go in, because you get to try a bit of all the different disciplines. And again, I kept thinking maybe I'll do paper, but I was just already known as sculpture conservator at that point, or outdoor sculpture. So learning from all of the wonderful people I had encountered up to that point, I used my time as a graduate student to try as many things as possible. So I never worked in a natural history museum, so I used one of my free electives to do that. I'd never done welding, so I used part of my time to do that. So just really trying to get build up my skill set through art courses, but then again, always merging it with what was required anyway from my program. And so, thinking, how am I going to market myself later? So my degree is sort of objects as a generalist versus focusing on one type of material, and then preventive conservation also. Just to back up a little bit about the wonders of networking. So being at the National Gallery of Art and meeting all these people, I was able to meet Paula Valenzuela, who works in Chile, and she was part of, I write it down, CNCR, which is their National Center for Conservation and Restoration. And I was able to go there for a summer and work in Chile, traveling around to different churches that had earthquake damage and working on Santos figures in situ. And Spanish is a little sketchy, but you learn, and I think my reports are still in Spanish. But so one thing else is, I only speak English. If you're able to even read another language, it just can open up so many doors. But that aside, and also at the time, I met two people from Australia. So within school, you do summer internships. So I was able to create a summer internship by talking to my colleague in the Queensland Art Museum in Brisbane, and set up the first objects conservation internship there. And then what you'll learn to do as a conservator is writing grants, asking for money, just looking for creative ways to finance your career. And what's great about the Winterthur program is they do teach you all of that, or they allow you to practice writing grants and all of the things you need to do, which is incredibly valuable. So where does that take us? So my third year, so you do 2 years of coursework at Winterthur, and then your third year is you do an internship in another place. And I, again, wanted to challenge myself. So as you've noticed, it's mostly been museums. And I wanted to challenge myself, and so I looked directly at National Park Service, which has an incredible lab based in Harpers Ferry Center, Willow Springs area. And so they have a regional lab there, which had a scientist, it had an anthropology department, has objects, furniture, textiles, and organic objects, and paper and books. So I wanted to be in this whole again, being able to work off of all of those disciplines, because there's so much to know with objects. There's so many different materials, and having all of that expertise in one place. Plus, they were dealing with a collection that was incredibly diverse in terms of location, how it's managed. So, as a regional type lab, it was sent out to different parks. And I don't know if you realize this, but the parks aren't just nature exhibits, it's also a lot of history. And in fact, the president's homes often become national parks. So did work with at Eisenhower's home, working on Mamie Eisenhower's tchotchkes. You just never knew what was going on. But sometimes you would get sent out and you would have to do surveys. So this was incredible practice about prioritizing what this collections manager needed to look at, but also thinking about, which is really hard, is time. How to estimate how much time a conservator would need, and a fair amount of time to consider things like travel. And documentation is a huge part of what we do, not just treatment itself. So that's photography as well as written documentation. So accounting for that when we make these estimates. So your treatment might, depending on your skill level, might only take 2 hours, but it'll take you 3 times as long to just do all the paperwork. So it was a great exercise working at these different national parks and seeing what they were dealing with. And I had just done this survey at Jean Lafitte in Louisiana, like 1 week before Katrina hit. So all our work we had done sort of null and void. But then being Park Service, we then were sent out to actually give workshops through Mississippi and Louisiana after the fact to sort of help the community actually, not just the parks, but how to deal with water damage and things like that. So I really enjoyed my time at Park Service. But then I got an opportunity to work for the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, to go back into museum work, but also to work in a collection that had such diversity from ancient to contemporary. So needless to say, I'm never bored at work. I'm always learning something from my from various colleagues, from the curators. So it's a wonderful place to be and to challenge myself continuously. So I think there was a question about learning how to, when you're sending out an exhibit and packing things. So at this museum, we are very fortunate to have a registration department, and within that we have art handlers, and we have incredible packers who know how to design crates. And we work very closely with them to think about things like shock damage, how to reduce any damage from a forklift trying to lift something. What is easier to move, how it fits on a truck, how it fits on a plane, all of those things go into consideration. And there are even groups that just talk about the different materials that you should use. And it's ever evolving, just the way there's always new products out there. So we work closely with registration to figure those out, those exact questions out. And even when we're considering a loan, so if someone has requested something, we will seriously think about, can I pack this safely? So that's been as much part of the consideration for saying yes or no to a loan, is can this piece even travel safely? So I've been at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts for 7 years, and I actually came before this was even open. So believe it or not, our conservation labs are up in this area in the new building, and I think that says a lot about what conservation is at Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, to be actually integrated into the architecture of the new building. I think it's a wonderful statement that preservation of the Virginia collection is important. So in terms of, I don't even know how to break down all my different tasks, but we do, so when something's even considered to be part of the collection,
we chime in and we look at every piece and talk to the curator about what type of maintenance is this piece going to need, especially like contemporary art that has electronic components. Is this sustainable in the long future? Do we need to buy more televisions now while they still exist? You know, just all of these things. Nothing like when you open something up and you're like, wow, even how, you know, with these giant discs and you're thinking, you know, so thinking about all those kinds of things, but also working with artists, interviewing them and finding out how they want us to treat that piece in the future. Is it, do you want it to fall apart? But it can be, there's a lot of challenges, and basically what I'm trying to say is nothing that happens in a vacuum. Everything I do is in consultation with the curator, with colleagues, which I really enjoy. I enjoy the collaborative aspect. So my primary role is to be the advocate for the preservation of the art. It seems straightforward, but it is surprisingly complex. It is politics, it's lobbying, it's a lot of writing, and all of that. But there's a sense of fulfillment when that's your mission, is to preserve something for people many hundreds of years later. It's very satisfying. It kind of keeps you going and keeps helping you do the fight. So that's how I ended up at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and stay tuned for more exhibitions on their way and changes in the permanent galleries. There's always something going on. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the sort of the conflict between preservation and access?
Yes.
Like even putting something, I mean, I know you're not supposed to touch things in the museum, but I'm sure things happen.
Oh, yeah. It's an incredible challenge. In fact, we're about to have a meeting about how to give guidance to our audience, to our constituents. I mean, how do we, like I said, I have to think hundreds of years later. And also, for example, outdoor sculpture, a lot of it isn't constructed like playground equipment. You know, there's no, you know, it's like, it may look sturdy, but it's not built for you to climb on the way something in a jungle gym would be rated. So how do you communicate that? And also just the fact that we have outdoor art and indoor art can be really challenging. And again, contemporary art, because clearly I must be working on something contemporary because it's on my mind. But I have a piece right now that I'm trying to figure out what kind of recommendations to make, because it's a piece you walk through. And how to, so within a gallery, how do you have pieces you don't touch and pieces that you do? How do you communicate that? To what kind of, do we have times when people can walk through it? Because we also have to think about what kind of security staff is needed. But also the artist is alive, so we have a chance to ask him, if that gets terribly dirty, can we replace it? And if so, can we have some replacement material? So for example, he already gave us replacement material for a certain aspect. And just also structure. An artist might be very fluid in how they construct something, and it's up. You know, but you put it together, you take it apart a couple times, and the screws, so you're starting to sort of exactly. So it's like, okay. So I'm actually working with the curator and drafting a proposal that we can then present to the artist and say, would it be, if we don't change any of how it looks, but we make it so that people can walk through it without getting hurt? Can we do that? So, I mean, really, this is like this week this happened. So it's very fresh in my mind, and I don't have a solution, but it's wonderful that I can have that conversation with the curator, and that she's open to talking to the artist about this piece. So if it all goes well, it should be up in the fall or late summer. So signage, how do you do something that sounds, do not touch? How do you say that nicely? I mean, how do you do that? And I actually have to say, I'm not against putting things out. I want that visual access, but how do I bridge the challenges of reality? I even maintain what I call the wall of shame, which is the footage that we have of bad behavior in the galleries. I mean, it's just, it's like a reminder, or when people think, oh, nothing happens, I'm like, welcome to my wall. Just people jumping up on platforms and sitting on the furniture, and I always try to tell people, conservators can be masters of illusion, in the sense that that chair will still look like a chair, but it may no longer have its structure as a chair. No springs, no support, so if you sit on it, you're gonna go right through it. And also, so those are the challenges, and so we work closely with design to figure out how, is there psychological ways, as well as signage, what kind of signage is most effective, the little hand with a cross through it, or the do not touch. And in fact, sometimes it's me lobbying for a piece saying, I'm getting security reports for this particular piece and writing constantly needing to write a damage report, so we have to document everything. And then lobbying for extra protection. So it's always a balancing act. How to have visual access, but try to preserve that piece too. So it's just part of the job. So did I get that?
Yeah, no, that's great. No, it's to me, it's very interesting. We want people to see it, but
Exactly. And
we don't want to ruin it for everybody else.
exactly. So it's for you and children beyond children, how to get that across. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of signage we end up coming up with. And I'm one of those people who goes to all those museums and takes pictures of how other people are doing it and prints off their gallery guidelines. And I just keep a big file just so that, but it is hard. Can you be hospitable as well as, can you be welcoming as well as setting rules? And one stance is that people want to know what the rules are and, or, how to, but without being. Yes.
So actually the reason that I kind of wandered here myself is because I was learning a bit about dinosaurs from the Kojo and Mandy show, and I asked if maybe like there was a discrepancy because dinosaurs' names are always changing. If after like taking apart these bolts and everything, if something that might maybe make the distinction between Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus, which would be the neck, like if you lose some of that, then what's going to happen? And they actually told me that the opposite happens all the time, that they find things in that dismantling that they never expected. So it sounds like quite a few interesting things happen. Have you ever had a random kind of like dirty work, sort of like there's coffee or something, soiled garments, where you find maybe more than you did before it even came to you, more sort of soiled than it was before?
In the sense that things come in so many different, for example, there is a ancient American cup that was in the collection. I was supposed to look at it and give a treatment proposal. And I'm like, well, there's all this stuff on the interior of it, which kind of looks like it could be just dirt over a long period of time. But it turned out there was another person doing research on beer cultures and trying to get beer cultures from these different pieces of ancient American vessels. So I was like, oh, well, that completely changes how I approach this particular treatment proposal. And then, of course, you start worrying about all the other things that maybe slipped past you. But with anything you approach it as knowing that someone else is going to interact with this piece later on. And they're going to bring, there's going to be new technologies, new research, and that particular person who encounters that piece after me is going to bring something to it. So my responsibility becomes documenting everything I do. Will I probably be cursed down the line? That's the risk I'm willing to take for honesty's sake, because I'll look at a report from the 1970s and be so thankful that it's there, because then I know what I'm looking at, why something might, how that repair might be failing, because now we have new adhesive. So it was the best option at the time, and I understand understand why they chose it. So I've been very humbled about being critical of things that have happened before, but also understanding restoration history, what was used at archaeological sites, things like that. Because then you kind of know what might be happening with your piece. Oh, it's coming from the 1950s. This was the popular thing. I should look out for a particular adhesive or phenomenon that's going on. And I think within the field itself, there's just ever-growing research base within conservation. But the key too is that as a conservator, you also look at other disciplines. So you will read other professional magazines. I think that's, and you learn to have those discussions with scientists, with mechanical engineers. You just never know who you're going to encounter. So to back up as an undergrad, I think whatever, if you fall in love with geology, make that your major. You can always do the prerequisites. You don't have to be an art history major. You don't have to be a studio art major. You don't have to be a chemistry major. Whatever you do, whoever you meet, whatever projects you do, will just make you a better conservator. You're going to bring something else to that table. You'll be the person who knows how to classify gems. Well, some of us are looking at books trying to figure out how that works. And you will have a whole network of people who already do the analysis. So I think that just all helps the field, the diversity of where you're coming from. So I'll see your question.
No, thank you.
Any others? Well, thank you very much.
So our next speaker is Mary Andrews, and she, Mary Scott Andrews is a native Richmonder, and she also studied at the University of London, and will tell you about her experience now.
Yeah, we seem to be kind of heavily weighted on the London this year, but that's okay. It's a great place.
It's the Institute of Archaeology at London. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, that's all right.
Put out my
That's right,
my
okay.
paper. University of London has several institutes associated with it.
Correct. University of London's kind of the umbrella organization. There are many colleges under it. It's a bit like, I guess the closest equivalent would be the State University of New York. You know, there are lots and lots of smaller colleges under that big umbrella. University of London's the same. There are probably a dozen different smaller colleges under that umbrella. And the Institute of Archaeology, which has now been subsumed by University College London, is kind of one and the same. But my background is I grew up here in Richmond. I went to college just outside of Philadelphia, a little college called Bryn Mawr College. Did a degree in, it was classical and Near Eastern archaeology. This was way back in I graduated in 1983 from there. When I graduated from there with this bachelor's degree in archaeology, it was really more of an art history, ancient art history degree. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. If I wanted to stay in archaeology, this is 1983, really the only opportunity for me at that point in time was to teach, which meant that I'd have to carry on, get a master's, get a PhD. Well, there were so many PhDs ahead of me already who were driving taxi cabs who couldn't get a job. Supposedly there were like 2 teaching jobs in the country every year that opened up in archaeology. I thought, well, that's really not a particularly lucrative way or a good idea for me to go that route. I was very, very fortunate that summer after I graduated from Bryn Mawr, I had an opportunity to go and study at the American School of Classical Studies in Athens. And I spent a fantastic summer, about 8 weeks, traveling all around the mainland of Greece, the Peloponnesus, and the island of Crete with 19 other people from all around the United States, basically traveling each day to 2 to 3 different archaeological sites and studying those sites in their entirety. And everyone in this group of 20 kind of came with their own little specialty, as it were. I had kind of, in my degree, I was predisposed with ancient architecture. I happen to particularly love that. So I had done extra coursework sort of in ancient architecture. So when I went to those sites, I could talk all about the architecture. Someone else was into epigraphy, and they could talk about that. Someone else was into the ancient history, and so like I said, everywhere we went, everyone can contribute. It was this fantastic summer. Well, anyway, I'd say probably week 2, we were in Athens, and we went to the Agora Museum, which was run by the Getty Museum. It's right at the foot of the Acropolis, Parthenon up there. And in this restored Stoa of Atlas is the museum. And in we went, and that was the first time I'd ever seen a conservation lab. I had never even heard of conservation at this point, and it was like that little proverbial light bulb just went ping right at the top of my head. And a guy named Steve Koob was the conservator there at the time, and he now is the, I think he's still the conservator at the Corning Museum, Museum of Glass up in Corning, New York. But back then, and this is 1983, it's a long time ago, he was a fresh graduate, I think from the Institute of Archaeology in London. Well, anyway, I just was so excited when I went into this lab and I saw what he was doing, and I thought, wow, this was a new field, kind of a new and growing field in 1983. And I thought, it's a combination of archaeology, working with your hands, working with objects, but also a science component. And I thought, this is really very exciting. And I thought, I can earn a living doing this. So came back to Richmond at the end of that summer, spent the next 2 years investigating conservation courses. See what was in this country. In this country, back then, they had the 3 courses, which are still around today. The one in Winterthur in Delaware, where Sheila went. There's one in Buffalo, New York, and then there's one at NYU and in New York City. And so I looked into those 3. Well, all of them dealt with what I would call sort of the fine arts. Paintings, objects, nice furniture, all this. And I really loved the archaeology. And there wasn't a program in the United States that really addressed archaeological conservation. So that's when I then looked overseas, and I found there was one in Wales, 3 in England at that time, 1 in France, 1 in Italy. And so, like Beth, I kind of discounted France and Italy because I didn't want to have to deal with the whole language issue. So, and I also had wanted to spend some time in England and study there. So I applied to the program in Institute of Archaeology, got accepted, asked them, could I please wait a year so I could earn money to be able to afford it, because as a foreigner, I had to pay very high rates. I didn't get the cheap rate that all the natives got. So I took a job working at McGuire Woods and Battle as a paralegal for a year. And it's amazing what you will do when you have to. Anyway, so here I am, I was a graduate in archaeology. I knew I wanted to get there. Oh, also too, I needed to have some time to get my science prerequisites, because you had to have a year of general chemistry and you had to have a year of organic chemistry, neither of which I had taken when I was doing my undergraduate degree. I had to do a lab science. I took geology, which I have to say I adored. And if I had my time again, I might actually be a geology major, because I've never met a geologist I didn't like. They're really fun people. But anyway, geology, and that actually has come to serve me very well in my career now as a conservator, because I really like working on stone objects. Anyway, so I did a 3-week intensive course at University of Richmond one summer, and I did a full year of general chemistry in 3 weeks, and that almost killed me, but I did it. And then when I was working at McGuire Woods and Battle, I would work at McGuire Woods all day, and then I would come here to VCU, and I did organic chemistry at night. And my hat is off to anybody who works full-time and gets a degree. I only did it for 1 year, and it almost killed me, especially when those organic chemistry labs, went from 7 to 11 after having worked all day in the law firm, and then you have to come and sit through a lab. It was hard, but again, fantastic organic chemistry professor. I wish I could remember his name when I was here, but he was wonderful. And so got through that, got a lot of teasing at the law firm, because there I was at lunchtime with my little flashcards trying to memorize all of my formula for my exams at night. But anyway, got through it all. Went off, did a 3-year program. It was the same program, it's an earlier version of the program that Beth did. So it was a bit different back then. It was a 3-year program. Unlike the way it sounds like they run it now, you did practical work from day 1. So I went through the 3-year program. My idea was that going into this, I was going to just do this for 3 years. Then I was going to try and do 2-year internships at various museums around the world, kind of work my way around the world, eventually ending up back in the United States after a few years, because I wanted to travel and see the world. And I thought this was a great way to do it. Well, by the end of my 2nd year at the Institute of Archaeology, I thought, oh my God, I love England so much. I do not want to go off and travel around the world. You know, I want to put my roots down here for a while and stay here. So I did have one elective my 3rd year, and so I was able to talk the powers that be at the Institute of Archaeology to let a colleague who was also in the program with me, the two of us are very interested in architecture. We talked them into letting us go around the corner to the Bartlett School of Architecture, and they actually did offer a course in architectural conservation. So we were allowed to do that. So we went off to this course for a year. And what was very interesting is when we went into that course, of course, we were the only 2 conservators. The others were all architecture students. Well, we quickly came to realize that everyone in this class, they were all being architecture students. They knew a lot about design, but none of them had any idea about material science. They didn't understand the materials that they were working with or that they were designing with. So we brought in a whole new dimension into that classroom, and the teacher there really loved us because the program at the Institute of Archaeology was in archaeological conservation and material science. So we had a lot of material science background. We had to study crystallography. We had to do a lot of a really good understanding right down the molecular level of all the different types of materials we were working with. So you learned about everything: metal, glass, stone, wood, you name it. Well, anyway, at the end of that 3 years, we decided that this colleague and I decided we really just wanted to start our own business because you could do it in England because they have a National Health Service. And so you didn't have to worry about how you're going to pay for your health care. And so we actually we cobbled together a year-long internship to work with conservation architects, people with English heritage, people in private practice, but mainly people who worked on historic buildings. Some who worked on some of the cathedrals, some who worked for the royal household, some who just worked for the local building authorities. And we went around with them to try and figure out where people with our experience in material science could assist architects who are having to take old buildings and refurbish them for new use, or just figuring out why the methods of deterioration. Why is this medieval building falling down? And so what we found was that there was a nice little niche in the market. This was back in 1988 at this point. Actually, I'm going to even head myself. Let me put a, which button? It's the right, no, that's the wrong button. Oh, it's the arrow. There we go. So you want to be a conservator. Do you like this is Windsor Castle burning. Do you like puzzles? That's ceiling fragments from a natural truss house I worked on, and we're starting to put it back together, a giant jigsaw puzzle. And that ceiling was almost as big as this room. Do you like foreign travel? That happens to be the front of Wells Cathedral. You like beautiful things? That was an Inuit statue. Well, that's a sculpture rather, which is put together. All right. So, as people have said in the past, I mean, you never know what's going to happen. When I did my degree in archaeological conservation, I had no idea that this is what I was going to end up doing. Exactly 1 year after I graduated, there was a huge fire at a National Trust property. This is called Up Park. It's near Chichester, and the south part of England. And they were on the final day of a re-roofing project for this house, hence all the scaffolding. And the plumbers were up there using glow torches, which is how they still work with putting up lead flashing in these old buildings. And went away to lunch, not realizing that in the hot work they'd been doing earlier in the day, it had gotten up into the roof with brand new roof and caught fire. And so they disappeared off, and about half an hour later, all of a sudden, and the house was open to the public. I mean, there were people wandering around. This was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. All of a sudden, someone saw flames coming out. And so here you see members of the public who've been gotten out of the house, all sitting there watching, going, oh gosh. So anyway, the long story short is that the house basically burned to the ground. It left the shell, it burned right down to the basement level, took out the entire roof. All that was left were the chimney stacks and the 4 external walls, with some of the internal walls, but certainly each floor went all the way through down to the basement. It just so happens, okay, because this always happens in life, just so happens, that the person who had just been appointed the head of conservation for the National Trust had been the person who used to be the head of the conservation program at the Institute of Archaeology. And Nigel Seeley knew me personally. He taught me everything I knew about conservation, and he knew that this friend and I were just starting out a business, our own business, in archaeological and architectural conservation. So he picked up the phone and he called us. And that was my first job, was working on this project. And he basically called and said, we need a couple of archaeological conservators with an interest in architecture to come and help, because what the National Trust has decided to do, and this is the very first time, this was 1989, I think, when this happened, fire happened. The National Trust before, when there were fires, they would just, that was it. The house was closed, it was just abandoned, it was left. But this time, they said, you know what? This was such a gem of a house, we are going to put the house back to what it was, like it was the day before the fire. And so we are going to restore it. And also, too, the good thing is that they had time to get most of the fine furniture, certainly out of the ground floor. So a lot was saved, but they needed a house to put it back into. So anyway, they called it English Heritage. And English Heritage archaeologists actually gridded and squared the house and made like an archaeological excavation and basically excavated it out. Now, my friend Maureen and I were asked to come in and help deal with all of the objects that were being taken out of the house to see what we could salvage and reuse. So this just shows you what the dining room looked like before the fire, and that's what it looked like after. So you can see floors above are gone. We had, I mean, it was a very dangerous place because this is very early days, because you can see all the light coming in because there's no roof, no temporary roof. I mean, we had hanging, we had bits of bars, hanging out over your head. There was still stuff falling off the rooftops. They were afraid the chimney stacks might topple. Here, we've quickly thrown up some hoarding over top. This is a beautiful carved marble fireplaces, fire surrounds. These were bits of plaster and wood paneling that had survived. So again, we just had to throw plaster over them, plastic over them to protect it from rain, because as you know, England is a very rainy place. Same thing happened a couple of years later at Windsor Castle. This shows you the private chapel, the Queen's private chapel, which is actually where the fire started at Windsor, by a conservator. But you're not supposed to do that. A paintings conservator who left a halogen light burning too close to a painting she'd been working on. Went away to lunch, it always seems to be lunchtime. Walked away at lunchtime and did not turn the halogen light off, which did a lot of heat, and the vapors coming off the painting caught fire. And the painting was set up near some curtains. Actually, these curtains here, I think it is. These are very long drapes, as you can see here. And anyway, caught fire. Well, when she came back in, they were burning. She did not know where the fire extinguisher was. That whole area of the castle at that time was closed for renovation. They were rewiring and replumbing. So the good news is that all of the furniture was out of the area, and most of the paintings and all were gone and in storage elsewhere. But still, this is what it looked like by the time they actually could get it under control, because this is a medieval building. This part of the castle was medieval, and there were no fire breaks. The fire just spread like crazy. A lot of wood paneling. Fire went from room to room. So, as you can see, pretty much total devastation. So, because of the work that I had done at Up Park, I then got that call at Windsor, could you come and do the same thing for us? So, this is showing you, and again, you can see these are actually English Heritage archaeologists. These are the same guys who had been at Up Park a few years earlier. But this just shows you, this is sort of the scale, this huge room. This room is probably, I would say the grand reception hall is probably 4 times the length of this room and twice as wide. It's huge. The scale of it was enormous. And, but you can see, this is all the debris which has fallen from above, and they're working their way down the aisles. You see clearing as they go. But literally, it's hand-picking. They're just hand-picking what they can can salvage, because they're bits of chandelier fragments, whatever's on the ceiling, plaster fragments, bits have all fallen off. Handpicking what they can, putting them into these bread bins here. Everything gets labeled because they created a grid square like an archaeological dig, and then it all came out, and then it became my responsibility. Once it came out, then it came to me, and it was my job to figure out what do we do with all of these things. So at Elk Park, we ended up with 3,200 dustbins by the time they had excavated everything. And a very exposed site, again, lots of problems, because where do you store all this stuff? Because there is nowhere to store it. Your big open field, you've got the one house, which is, and you can see here, these things are just, these chimney stacks are just standing there. Any high wind could have toppled them. Luckily they didn't, and they got a temporary roof up fairly promptly. But we had to deal with the problem of what do you do with all this sort of stuff. So we started the process of sieving and rented from the Ministry of Defense with this conveyor belt, which they use for sifting bomb debris of all things. And well, back then the IRA was still quite active, and they were setting up bombs all the time. So anyway, at great expense, the Natural Trust was able to rent this from the Ministry of Defense. And so they would empty one of these dustbins. As it slowly went by, they would pick things out. It would go back down the other side, have a second look, and then anything left over at the end of that all ended up in the just being thrown away. Now, one of the problems we had those big black dustbins. It's wet, ash, all mixed in there. These black dustbins are sitting outside in the sun when the sun does shine, up to 3 months. We knew it takes 3 to 4 months to process all of it. So we were worried, okay, what's going to happen? So you can see here, mold is starting to grow on some of these wooden elements. What we did was we took a variety of these elements and kind of did a test, put them in polythene bags, put them in a dark, tried to replicate the environment of these black bins. So, and then we had a specialist, I don't think I have a picture here. No, we had a specialist come in to identify the molds that were growing on it to see if we were going to have any major problems. Luckily, none of the molds that were growing were things that were going to cause damage to the object themselves. So we were lucky in that respect. So we managed to, over 3 or 4 months, finally get through everything. In the meantime, we had to throw up temporary protection for all of these salvage items. So we put up these agricultural, what we call polythene storage tents, had our builders put in these hinge doors. We sighted it into the prevailing winds. When the weather was good, we'd open up both ends, let the air move through. Most of this is where our large structural timbers that we were saving. Again, things that got really wet, you can't dry things out quickly. You have to do it in a fairly slow way. But of course, they had so much of it, we had to figure out some logical way of doing it without it damaging the material. I mean, my job as kind of the first line of defense for conservation was just to try and stabilize everything until such time as then the specialists could come in. Now, these guys have talked about being a specialist. And for me, I found that being a generalist was good because I knew a little bit about a lot of things. This sort of project was perfect for me because I knew enough to not get myself into too much trouble, but I knew enough to be able to get things into a nice holding pattern, and then I knew the right people to call who did specialize in the wood or in the plaster or in the glass, whatever, and then hand off to them then to take the conservation to the next step. We set up the metals. Metals require a lot more sort of specific parameters to keep them from deteriorating. The relative humidity and the temperature has to be just right, or you'll get rust or deterioration. So we were able to get kind of one of these, what they call a site hut. You see these on building sites, just temporary office blocks. It's a little bit more insulated. And we've set up, sorry, wrong way. Here we go. We set up a dehumidifier, and then we had a lot of, they're sort of like hobos. I can't remember what we called them back then. The hobos now, they register the temperature and relative humidity every 5 minutes or half an hour or whatever, so you can maintain a steady environment. And again, just as to make sure that everything is okay. Now, how many of you knew the Queen had a mushroom farm? I didn't know the Queen had a mushroom farm until I started working there. And in Windsor Great Park, she had a mushroom farm. And we were desperately looking for places to store all of this stuff that was coming out. like we had done at Uphart. And someone said, well, actually, there's a mushroom farm just, half a mile, from the castle. Why don't we get them to move all their mushrooms out? And here we've got nice environmentally controlled storage areas. So we managed to get the mushroom sheds. And what we did, and this shows you inside the mushroom sheds, I was telling you about all the paper, all the bread bins full of fragments. Well, these are just ceiling plaster fragments. And this is just one bin. And you see each individual one is got a label, and that tells you exactly which grid square it came from. The idea being that once we were able to dry everything out in this nice controlled environment, we could then clean it, and as you saw in that earlier picture, basically lay out it on the floor and piece it back together, and then evaluate, have a plaster conservator come in and say, this still has good structural integrity, we can reuse this piece, no, this piece is too badly damaged, let's toss that out. Then their job was then to piece the old pieces into the ceiling and then build up new around it. It was really fantastic, amazing, talented people who were able to do this. So that's Uphart now. That's after it got rebuilt. They did a very fine job, and that shows you that's the St. George's Hall. This is the first hammer beam roof to be built since Henry VIII's time. Fantastic bit of wood carving and woodwork. This room is about almost 100 meters long. It's unbelievably big. But again, that just shows you the level of workmanship. And all of these bits, everything at this level, even though the ceiling had been completely gone, all of these bits are original to the house, but have been cleaned and conserved. Every one of these little shields, these are all Knights of the Garter. You may have heard of Knights of the Garter. Well, each one of those is for a different Knight of the Garter. And those had been in the original ceiling and fallen. And a lot of those are original. And then we were able to salvage those and conserve them and put them back up. A few of them had to be made new. Now, as an objects conservator, you work on objects, obviously, of all different sorts. So to do what I do just a little bit of everything. So this just shows you can be working on this just happens to be a ceramic piece. And here you can see that was a broken bit. You can see someone had repaired it with some nasty glue earlier, some adhesive that had given way, but now it's gone back. And like this is a clean break. You see there's nothing there. So and there it is with the back on. So you can work on objects like that. I worked out at Maymont. I don't know if you guys have been out to Maymont, to the house there. They've got a very large wraparound porch on two sides of the house, the west and the south. On the south side, when you walk under that porte cochere, I think it's when you walk out of the you go in for a tour. You walk in the west door and you walk out the south. And when you walk out the south door, you'll see it's this tessellated floor right there. And in here you can see this green. I think this is a green. I was never able to get it analyzed, but I'm pretty sure that this is what they call greenstone, which is quarried actually here in Virginia, in the foothills of the Blue Ridge. But it was deteriorating quite badly. These are ceramic. These are actually a fired ceramic tile, and then the rest of this here is this is stone and this is stone. But anyway, there was a lot of degradation going on. So I was able to go in and make good with this using a colored artificial stone, basically. And anyway, and I regrouted and cleaned and repaired the entire thing a number of years ago. Now these three pieces here, these three tessera here were all missing. This was a big hole. And what we were finding is that when people saw holes, they start to reach down and start picking off bits and put it in their pocket. Because that's what people do when they're needing to go in for their tour. And they take bits of Maymont with them. So I went in where there were holes, and then I just created new tessera and inserted them, and then regrouted all around it. So that's something you might be doing. I had a great job working at the homestead. Oh my God, that was a really fun job. Because I got to stay at the homestead for free for a whole week in a suite. She put me up in a suite. It's like $1,000 a night. It was really nice. And I loved that. And I got paid. And I got to take my husband and my daughter. They loved it more than anything. So, in fact, when my daughter was 7 at the time, and every day I'd come in at 5 o'clock, and she'd be stretched on the bed with the remote control going, Mom, please never change jobs. She was just having the best time. But anyway, the homestead had a problem. In the basement, they had all of these, just several rooms that just look like this. These are all the old early ledgers from the homestead going way back into the 1800s, even the early 1700s. Ledgers, all kinds of just ephemera, just all kinds of stuff, really. And they didn't know what to do with it. And so I got together with people over at the Virginia Association of Museums of VAM, and we put together, first I went up and kind of surveyed to see what they had. And then through VAM, we put together sort of a working group of museum professionals, and they could get kind of credit, museum credit as it were, for going and helping out. So we all then went up for a week and basically sorted through all of their stuff and got it organized. So, we started out with rooms like this, and everything just higgledy-piggledy, and we just went through and basically sorted it out for them and told them what they had, inventoried it, did all that. So as an objects conservator, you may find yourself doing something like that. Back at Maymont, for those of you who haven't been in the last few years, they completely redid the whole basement. The basement for many, many years, basically, well, this is a cleaned up version. It was full of rats and snakes and mice. It was pretty nasty. You did not want to go in the basement down there. It was a pretty scary place. But they got the funds and did a lot of, Dale Weary, who's the director there, did years of research. And they have managed now to put back the entire basement. I think it's 7 rooms. And so my job really was basically to make good and clean up all of the objects that were going in to the exhibition. And so probably the nastiest job I had, this was kind of the hot water pipe, a hot water tank. And here's the sink turned on its side, which is, you can see it over here now. But underneath it, they still had the fat trap. And I had to clean the fat trap. That was not fun. So sometimes you have kind of icky jobs, but I asked for a hazardous duty tank, but they wouldn't give it to me. All right. Then, and this is just another, this is the servant, this is where one of the servants' quarters, where the housemaids would say. But this just shows you, you may be working in an environment like this, but this is what you get in the end. It's actually very satisfying work. At Maymont, this was a really interesting project. I worked with a sculpture conservator. She actually trained initially as a sculptor. She's a very talented sculptor up in Baltimore, a woman named Laura Oliphant. And she, in fact, did all the stone restoration, conservation on the Lincoln Memorial. And she can tell you funny stories about digging hornet's nests out of his nostrils. But his nostril, each nostril was like this big. It's enormous. But anyway, she said that she got the project to come down and the contract to come down and clean this. Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong one. This Three Graces sculpture, you see how dirty it is. It used to sit just outside the south door of the mansion, and it's just a little bit of ways from the house. It's quite close there. And so they asked her, would you come and clean it, and then could she make a replica of it? Because they wanted to because this is an original Canova, I think it is, 19th century Italian sculptor. So this is a really quite a valuable sculpture, and they wanted to bring it inside because they just didn't want to leave it outside anymore, and it was deteriorating. And so they asked her, could you clean this, and then could you make a replica in artificial stone that can then go out its place, and then we will put the original inside and under protection. So she said yes. So I was working at Maymont at the time, and when I met her, I went, I said, can I help you? And I think she was a little skeptical first because she didn't know me from Adam. And she said, oh, okay. And then when she realized I kind of knew what I was doing, she then ended up hiring me, which is great. So you always have to be an opportunist, okay? That's the other thing to remember if you're going to do conservation. Never be afraid to ask, can I help? Because sometimes people will say yes. Anyway, so that ended up, and she's actually become a really good friend of mine now. I love her, and I've worked on several projects with her up in Baltimore since then. But anyway, so we cleaned it all up, and this shows you what it looks like after. You see how beautiful it is now. It's all clean and with nice little wax coating on it. Then this was really interesting for me because I am not a sculptor. I'm not creative that way, all right? I'm okay at dressmaking, but I never got past stick figure 101. I have no studio arts background. I'm really not that way inclined at all. I can color match pretty well, but that's, I'm not an artist at all. And yet I still have been able to do this job for 20 some years. So like I said, people can come at it from all different angles and still have fun. So anyway, Laura is, like I said, very talented, and so using tin flashing, she was able to create these different zones, and it was a multi-piece mold. I mean, and this is a life-size statue, and it's very heavy, probably weighed a ton. And because we had to build an A-frame and have, hoists and all that kind of stuff to lift it up and move it around. So first, we created these zones. We then covered it with latex rubber that then went off. And then once that was done, we then created what's called the mother mold, which is a plaster reinforced with a bit of metal work here. You see some metal struts here to give some support then to the latex mold. Here you can see a latex mold here. But as you know, with latex, it's very soft. So you needed to somehow create when you pull it off, the sculpture, you needed to have some support so that we can then cast a new one. So that's what that's showing. And then here we go. We actually cast two. So these are the two casts that we made. One that stayed there, and then one which was then, you can see here. And then here you can see the mold. It's all wrapped up, and we had to pour the artificial stone mix down in from the bottom. And anyway, and then one of them stayed there, and then one we auctioned off to raise funds for Maymont. But that was a really interesting project. Oh, and you can even make fake food. There's actually a great demand and a great need for fake food. So for those of you who are really creative and are good, this is food that we've made for Age Club, because I worked at Age Club too some. And so we made a pie, and we made some rolls, and these are made those are cast in plaster and painted. These are both cast in crayons. Well, I made in my daughter's crayon box. And these are cast in wax. So again, you get the real thing, and then you cover it in latex, and then peel it off, and then fill it. So, but anyway, yeah, the historic house museums need fake food because they can't put real food out, and they're always needing new food because stuff gets broken, or it's not particularly good, or they whatever. So, and polymer clays are another good thing too. If you're good at sculpting with Sculpey, that sort of thing, there's definitely a need for someone who's good at making fake food enrichment. But anyway, so that just gives you a general idea of the sorts of things you can do as a self-employed objects conservator. I traveled widely. I was very lucky when I first started out. When I was in England before I got married and had children and responsibility, I was able to travel extensively. I worked on excavations up in Orkney off the north coast of Scotland. I worked on excavations in the United Arab Emirates and in Jordan. You have super cool experiences when you do that. I mean, you can ride a camel at night through Petra, and you can do all kinds of cool stuff that you wouldn't normally get to do just as a tourist. And I cannot tell you how much I loved that aspect of the job, being able to travel and have these amazing experiences. And as the others have attested, every day is different. And this week, I'm working 5 different projects this week, and next week it's going to be different. And it makes it hard for people who, like my mother-in-law, who doesn't understand that I'm not going to be, at the same place at 3 o'clock every Wednesday. I can't, some people don't understand that, but if you like flexibility and that makes you feel comfortable, that's great. If you really like a more 9-to-5 job, maybe doing what I do is not so good for you. But I have to say, I personally thrive on having that variety, and again, being able to mix and match with all my other conservation friends. And I would just really, they've all pretty much, I think have pretty much said it, that you network through joining the organizations. VCA, I moved here from England, and this resonated with me what Beth said, coming back here after living in England, I spent 15 years in England before I moved back here. And so even to this day, Sheila will tell you when I'm working on something at the VMFA, I'll go and say, oh, where's the mylar? And she'll go, or I'll say, no, where's the Melanex? And she goes, what's Melanex? I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's the English name. Oh, it's mylar in American. So unfortunately, I learned all of my materials in England by the names, and now I'm trying to, you have to kind of relearn what things are called here. So it does take a little while to make that transition, but you get there in the end. And I just think that if you enjoy variety, you will definitely get a lot of job satisfaction. You always have something interesting to talk about at the dinner table. You definitely what's at the dinner table, because you're always meeting someone interesting, or going somewhere interesting, or working on something really interesting or beautiful. So, I mean, I'm working on a project and have done for a number of years now with Sheila at the VMFA, and most people go, oh my God, I can't believe you've been doing that for 4 years, how boring, which is cleaning silver. I've been polishing silver, but you know what? It's the preeminent 18th century English silver collection in the world, and I don't mind spending hours cleaning this because it is absolutely beautiful. I mean, and they're paying me, So who else gets paid to work on beautiful objects and talk to their friends and hang out in a beautiful place like the VMFA, or spy on people down in the sculpture garden, which you can do for the conservation lab. That's a great place to be. So anyway, I could talk, as these guys will tell you, I could talk for 20 hours about what I do, not 20 minutes. So, and it's overtime, and people are welcome to ask questions. Anyone can call me, anyone can email me. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm a little bit long in the tooth here, because I did all my training so long ago, but things have changed a little bit. Yes?
So, I'm thinking about that slide that you showed of the inside the mushroom farm. Is it, when you're doing a crazy architectural restoration, like those two that you showed us, does it always take much more space than
Than where it came from?
Right.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because when you think about it, first of all, you've taken it out of the space where it is, because it can't stay in there while they're putting the roof back on and repairing it all. So you have to find the equivalent amount of space to put it elsewhere. In fact, even at Windsor, not only did we take over the mushroom farm, we also took over a bunch of her stables, and the horses had to be moved off to somewhere else, because we had to take all the doors off inside the house, and some of the doors, were 2 stories tall, and this wide and this, and they have to be stored vertically. You can't store wooden doors flat. I mean, Bill will tell you, being a wood guy. There's certain, storage is a huge problem, especially, these are 2 unusual projects, both Windsor and Up Park, because both the scale is so huge. Normally, when there's a fire, it's in a smaller house for one. In both these cases, one was a stately home and one was a castle. And so the scale was just huge and not what you would normally, or when there are fires, it might be contained just in one room, whereas in both these cases, it was just so large. So yeah, but the truth is, yes, you always have that problem with storage and where you're going to put it. But yeah, and for example, with all those ceiling fragments that came down, it's, because they've all come down in a big jumble, you've got to be able to spread them out, like say, like a giant jigsaw puzzle, to figure out which, and the worst bit, and this is something that I've learned, and that now every historic house I go into, one of the first things I say to the directors, have you taken photographs of your decorated painted ceiling, or your decorated ceiling? Because if that thing ever falls down, we need a picture, to be able to put it all back together again, because we didn't have any pictures. And we had to kind of guess. We were looking at pictures that had been taken of pretty rooms at an oblique angle, but no one had ever thought to lie on their back in the middle of the floor and take a picture straight on of this decorated plaster ceiling. So the architects, when they were trying to recreate it on paper, had a really hard time. But yeah, it's super interesting, these projects. I don't know if I'd ever want to do another one again. There's, it all sounds really great, but there was a huge headache factor involved. You don't really want to work for the Queen. Because she's a really nice lady, don't get me wrong, but when she wants to walk her dogs, she gets to walk her dogs, and everyone gets locked into the house, into the castle, or down at the mushroom farm, and no one can go out until she finishes walking her dogs. And if she wants to walk her dogs for 2 hours, oh, she can. But guess what? We've all priced on an hourly rate to get this work done, and time's ticking away, and we're losing money every moment she's out walking the damn dog. So, it's a lot of people lost money on that job, really. So like I said, it might sound good, but there are some bits that, I mean, it is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I have to say, I learned an awful lot. And there were some good moments, but I had to walk a mile to get to a toilet when I was in the castle, because I was at mere pleb, and we weren't allowed to use the toilets in the castle. Oh no! So we had to go out of the castle, find our way all the way down to where all they set up the porta potties for all the workers, but when there's no roof and everything, and there are no floors, you're having to climb up this ladder and down this ladder and down this hallway and through this window and out that wall, and so half an hour just to go to the bathroom. So then another half hour to walk back, so you've lost another hour of your time. So, I mean, that's the sort of thing that's the reality. So, you probably think it's too much information, really. Anyway, anything else? Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you to all of our speakers. One of the handouts that I have here is the list of North American conservation programs and a link if you're interested in studying abroad. I think that we can take away a lot of good information from our speakers, and I've had the pleasure of working with Mary on some disaster recovery projects, and I will tell you that she knows a lot about everything. There is a study break that will be happening in this room starting around 6 o'clock, but everything's going to stay like it is, so we can have time to talk with our speakers more if you'd like to, and thank you all for coming.